There you go. All right, we are live. This is always so nerve-wracking, and I feel like Mary Catherine Gallagher. For any references, if you know that. But anyways, we read The Bear and the Nightingale. Not just us, a lot of people, because this has blossomed into a thing, which I'm very, very excited about. But The Bear and the Nightingale, which is the first book in the Winternight Trilogy by Katherine Arden, I think is one of my, if not my most favorite book of all time. So I'm a little biased, and I will be a little biased in this discussion. That's why I have these lovely people here to help me discuss this book and what they liked, what they didn't like. But before we get into the discussion, I will let everybody introduce themselves. Directionally challenged here, starting with Igor.
Hello. I'm joining everybody from the city of the Grand Princes, Moscow. I'm the resident Russian of this conversation, and I read The Bear and the Nightingale with a lot of pleasure. I loved both Katherine Arden's style and the characters, and of course, the way she works with facts. She has researched this very well, and it shows, and I really loved how she showed our culture with lots of respect and love, and I'm hoping to share a little bit on the background and my experience of this book. Thank you. Now, Sarah, direction is wrong, but
but I'll go next.
Sarah,
I'm still very excited that you're here. I'm just going to smile. I'll stream long now. I am Sarah. My channel is called Sarah Reads. I'm really happy that Evie asked me to join her. This book, before I read it, I knew would be a book that I would like because it's exactly the kind of thing that I like to read. And I did really end up enjoying it. And I'm very excited to discuss it with everybody.
Oh. Yeah, totally.
So, hi everyone. I am Jolien. I also have a channel, Jolien Reads. I read a lot of fantasy. I read the Winternight Trilogy with zero expectations a couple of years back. So I'm really glad that we're doing read along now because I usually don't do rereads. And this has made me reread this book and just realize how much I love it. So I guess that all of us actually love the book. So it's going to be a gush fest, probably. Yeah, looking forward to it.
Oh, I bet it will be. I'm Kate. My channel is the Almost Book Doctor, and I read predominantly fantasy. This is one of those books, and I don't know if you guys have done this, but I dance around books at the bookstore. I'll pick it off the shelf, and I'll be like, I'm going to get this, and then I go, I'll wait. This is one of those books. I think I almost bought it like 5 times, and I never pulled it there. And so I'm really glad that Evie gave me a reason to, and I really loved it. I needed a fairy tale after all the other heavy stuff I'd been reading. So this is just perfect for what I want.
And medical school. But I was actually the exact same way. I kept calling to me like a siren song from the bookstore shelves, and I'm like, I don't know if I'll like it. I don't know. And then it happened to be a book club pick for a local book club that I'm randomly occasionally in, and I read it and I fell absolutely in love with it. And I'm like, I'm ordering the next 2 books. So, and I'm so glad that like they picked it randomly for that book club, because otherwise I don't think I would have pulled the trigger on it and gotten it. So yeah, this is my second time reading it I read it last year, obviously, because we read it in December. But I actually first read it in February. So twice in a single year, I've read this book. And for me, it's going to be a yearly reread of the entire series, at least the first book, but I think the entire trilogy. And I just absolutely love it. It speaks to everything that I love in this world. So I'm very excited to discuss it with you guys. We will be having, we have a bot. We will be having someone else join us, Stacy, but she's having technical difficulties, so we might pause and bring her in so she can introduce herself as well. Either way, I have everybody's channels linked in the description below, so you can definitely check them out now if you would like. Definitely subscribe to them at some point. So, I see that we already have a bunch of people. Hi, John. Hi, Anita. Hi, Melly. Yes, read the book and then come back. Mm-hmm. Yay, Kate. The other Kate.
Win.
Yes.
Not really, not literally, but.
Yeah. Oh, I guess you kind of already mentioned it, Igor, but like, how did you guys like the book? Like, what was your kind of experience with it? Had you known about it before? Was it calling to you like a siren song like me?
So who's first?
Yeah, I mean, anyone can hop in. It doesn't matter.
Well,
you go
yeah,
first.
Yolene. You go first.
Well, I really loved it, but I love fairy tales. So in general, that was the pitch talk that made me pick it up. And this was back in the days when I bought one book and I was going to read that one book. And that was the one book that I had on my TBR. And I think that I was 50 pages in and I decided to just buy the entire trilogy because I knew that I wanted to continue with it. But Russian folklore and that side of fairy tales is something that I don't really know a lot about. So that was refreshing. Usually when I read a fairy tale retelling, I know the original story. Here it was original enough that I didn't know what to expect. But still you had like these small things that I could recognize, which made me just fall in love with the story. But I think that most of all, it's the atmosphere. You have the characters and they are engaging, even though I don't know if I absolutely love Vasha. I think that she has some qualities that might not be the best, but just the entire atmosphere is what drew me in.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I love about it is that it feels like a modern fairy tale. It's written like one, and I love that about that.
I really wish, because you just talked about atmosphere, that I could show you outside my window, because we are in the middle of a giant snowstorm. There's like supposed to be 150-kilometer winds today. It's snow. There's snow everywhere. Like, I looked out one moment because my daughter asked to build a snowman this morning. I was like, okay, well, we'll go out after we get this done. And it was fine. And then I looked out the next minute. I couldn't see the houses next door. And I was like, well, I guess we're not going outside now. So it's like the perfect weather for discussing this book. But I agree. The atmosphere is fantastic. You feel the cold as you're reading it. And like Yolene, I really like fairy tale retellings, but I didn't know that much about Russian folklore, Russian fairy tales. So hopefully Igor can give us some history or some context to see how good a job Katherine Arden did for that.
Yeah, I was tempted to kind of set myself outside because we have about a foot of snow on the grounds, but I'm like, it's cold, so I'll just stay here.
I've been having trouble sleeping lately. Yay, anxiety. But I was like up in the middle of the night and it was freezing cold, and I was like, I'm gonna read this. I'm reading right now, so let me go sit on my balcony in the cold and look at the snow and read this book. And it was awesome. It just like I like bundled up with a blanket, and it was really nice. But I love this, and I really am glad that we read it in the winter time, because I don't think I would have been as enchanted by it if it wasn't cold outside and there was that like feeling and that smell in the air.
Yeah, so Melly's comment kind of sparked this in me. So
Story.
Yeah. Arden starts off with a Pushkin quote, which I have never read Pushkin, so I thought it was a nice kind of epigraph to start, but I'm sure there's more context to it than I know. Have any of you guys read any Pushkin?
Mm-mm.
Or know the context?
Obviously, I have. I can recite to you this quote in the original, if you wish.
Oh, nice.
The one in the beginning of the book. It's a fairy tale in verse, and it's how it starts. У лукоморья дуб зеленый, золотая цепь на дубе том, и днем, и ночью кот ученый все ходит по цепи кругом. Идет направо, песнь заводит, налево сказку говорит. That's these 6 lines that we have in the epigraph. It's the beginning of a very famous literary fairy tale with a knight errant with a very sassy damsel who really doesn't need saving. It's from the 19th century, but it's really cool, and we all read it in childhood. It's something that's familiar to most readers here. So this is a nice tone-setting bit for the book. I was actually expecting something less well-researched. You know, I was expecting Hollywood tropes and such, but when I opened it and read the first couple of chapters, I saw that Katherine Arden really knows what she's doing. really knows the facts, really knows how to weave them into the text. Everything, like the smallest details about what they're eating, how their house is made up, almost everything fits nicely into either the historical reality or into our ideas of it, filtered through literature, filtered through fairy tales. So it's a nice blend of history as we learned it here and fairy tales as we hear them in our country. So she did a very good job.
Yeah. I think before we get into the actual like kind of spoiler discussion, overall non-spoiler thoughts, how would you like pitch this book to anyone that hasn't read it before or might have interest?
I would definitely use the word lyrical, because the description, the landscapes are very full of emotion, full of color. I really like how Arden writes about nature, how she describes landscapes, and how exact she is in her color adjectives. I mean, this very basic thing, but she does it so well.
I think most people describe it like as atmospheric. That's one of the words that gets thrown around a lot. I would probably say, I think the way I've described it to people when I have been explaining it recently is like, it's the best version of an adult fairy tale that I can imagine right now, because it does feel like a fairy tale, but it doesn't feel juvenile in any way. It doesn't feel like a middle grade story or even like really a YA. It feels really slotted into that adult, but it feels softer and lyrical, like you said, Igor.
What about you guys, Sarah and Yolene?
It's basically just more of the same. I think to give people everything that they would need, it is, at least I felt like it was a slowly unfolding story. So you have to like that. You have to go in knowing that this is about the writing, like Igor said, and about that fairy tale feeling capturing you and pulling you in and pulling you through the pages, because it's not going to be a quick plot driven story that you're given. But if that's what you like and if that's what you're looking for, then I can't think of anything that really does it better than this.
Yeah, I agree. Going on top of everything that all of you already said, I also think that it's the very good book if you want to have about the damsel, but not the damsel in distress. She can take care of herself, and I really liked how she was so confident in her fate. So if you like that, if you like a very strong female character without her having all of a sudden very masculine traits, because that's what you often see, a strong female character, yes, but she has masculine traits. Here she's still very female. And if you like that, I think that you will like this book as well. I also really liked the introduction or the inclusion of religion and then the clashing of religions, because that's something that I quite enjoy in books as well.
I think oh, sorry, Kate.
I was going to say, I think you can read this as a surface level story, and it's beautiful and it's fun and it's well written. But the nice thing about it, and we kind of got into it on our Discord chat, is that there are a lot of themes that unfold in this story that you can really dig into and talk about, like gender relations, the religion and all that stuff, that there's just like under the surface if you want to dig at it, which I really enjoy in a story like this, because it appeals to a lot of different readers, I think.
Yes.
And it's a little bit different. It's handled a little bit differently than a lot of historical fantasy. And Yolene, I know you read a lot of historical fantasy as well. And often when we're reading that and we see this religious incursion, there are two very definite sides. But in this story, like Vasya and her family have accepted Christianity. They just want to also have their own traditions and customs. So it's more about the melding of it rather than a conflict, which is what, at least from the books that I read, what you see more often. You get that point of conflict where the new religion is just starting to come in and you're feeling that pushback against it. But this is more about kind of the melding of those two different belief systems and how they can coexist, peacefully.
Yeah,
And that's true historically. I mean, that's what actually happened in the history of Rus, of old Russia. The two beliefs really did meld to a degree and coexisted for a very long while. I mean, Christianity had been around for like 300 years or even more by the time of the book's setting. But the description really rings true about how people probably structured their beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's
Yeah, I would say for me, going back to the character of Vasya, while she is the protagonist, the thing that I've found most appealing, at least for me, is that she's a character that is so strong and so definite as in her beliefs and in her characterization that you would typically expect like a character arc of a protagonist, where in The Bear and the Nightingale, again, for me, and this is just my perception of it, Vasya stays quite the same, and it's everyone else around her that changes and has these kind of challenges of their beliefs, of themselves as people. And I thought that was really, really well done. It could easily have made Vasya kind of like cardboard cutout or cookie cutter or just kind of vanilla or bland, but she still was very compelling in her kind of stasis, I guess, in a way.
Mm-hmm.
I think. But that might not appeal to some people. I know.
I forgot about that guy before. Oh, sorry.
I
Sorry, my
think
internet's a little laggy.
But you okay?
Go ahead.
yeah, I think
Yeah.
that the way Arden expresses this, the way Vasya does not change, we see that her kind of inner core stays the same, but we see very clearly how the expression of this inner core changes with time. So that's why I think it works. She doesn't change within, but her outer expressions do change, and she grows in this sense.
Which makes sense, because I think sometimes we have unrealistic expectations of change in books, because often we follow these characters over a couple of weeks or months of their lives, and we're like, oh, where's the growth? How much did you grow in the last 6 weeks? Like, how much did you change in that period of time? Not a whole lot. So I think we often want that from books, but it's not the most realistic, expression of human personality.
Hey, Stacey!
Oh.
Hey.
Apologize for being late. I am very bad with computers.
It's cool. Technology is the bane of everybody's existence, but it's also the greatest thing in existence as well. So, so Stacey, before we carry on, why don't you introduce yourself real quick and you have a channel? I know that much.
Yeah, I do. I have a fledgling channel. I think I've only got 2 videos. But I'm Stacey. I'm from the US, but I live in Finland. And I'm trying to get my channel up and going with the help of my 10-year-old. So
I love her.
So I'm very new at this. And so.
Quick thoughts on the book, though. Did you like it?
Oh, I loved it. It was a reread for me.
Oh, I didn't realize that. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So yeah. Kind of going to spoilers, I guess. Well, I guess at this point, spoiler talk, we can just go rampant. It starts off. It covers a wide expanse of time. You start off before even Vasya is born, which I thought was. It took me a couple chapters to get into it, but then I realized, oh, this is actually really good. So I thought that was a really great inclusion to start off with Dunya kind of talking about fairy tales and telling a fairy tale. It again helps set the expectation, and I think it kind of not what's the word I'm looking for? Foreshadows. There you go. Mm-hmm. Foreshadows what happens later in the book. Did you guys have any thoughts on like that? Those first few chapters, or Marina? And I mean, she seemed very intent on having Vasya, regardless of what happened to her.
Yeah,
I'm very intrigued about the secrets. I feel like one of the things I love about books is when authors leave breadcrumbs throughout the story of something that you're going to learn later, especially big things like what is Vasya? What is this knowledge that people have about her that she doesn't know? And her mother, it seems like her mother knew it too. And so getting that from the very beginning of the story, I think set the tone. And I was like wondering like what's going to happen the whole time. And I really loved that about it. And you get emotionally invested as well right from the beginning, because the mother's so intent upon this, and that kind of thing, you know, mother dying in childbirth and all that is very emotional. And I felt like that really made me feel connected to Vasya right away in the beginning. So.
Yeah, I agree. I think that there was a prologue. I think that it's on her website. Maybe it's not anymore, but I read it that she wanted to include it first, but then she thought better of it. And that's, I think that the mother, Marina, has a small encounter with the Winter King before she's pregnant. And they already have like, that they talk to each other, and that he tells her that she should give her next child, or that there's going to be a connection between the two of them. And I'm actually glad, when I read it, it's beautifully written, but I'm actually glad that she didn't include it, because that would have been almost too on the nose. While now you have that story within a story that the nursemaid is telling them. And like you said, Evie, it's foreshadowing, but while you're reading it, you don't know what's going to happen. It's then when you get to that moment that you're like, oh yeah, we read that in the beginning. So I liked that it's a little bit, but it's not too much. But I don't know if the prologue is still on our website. But I was very surprised when I saw it there.
Huh. I'm going to check
I
that
did
out.
not know that. Yeah, I think that would have completely changed everything. So I'm glad she didn't do that either.
Mm-hmm.
I like Kate's comment where she said that the beginning establishes the family relationships with Vasya as the troublesome but lovable baby sister. I think it does do a good job of setting the stage for her place within the family and how the dynamics are going to work out and what it's going to be like without her mom moving forward. So I do like the beginning of the book for that reason. And in books like this, I kind of accept that there's going to be temporal shifts and there's going to be things that, you know, are kind of nebulous and you need to wade through them, because that's just how fairy tales feel.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I know, Igor, you kind of mentioned about kind of the fairy tale inspirations, and was it Prope that you referenced?
Yes. I referenced the famous, at least here, famous scholar Vladimir Prope, who studied the structure of a fairy tale using both Russian and foreign materials, and how fairy tales usually tend to have a certain arc. It's basically very similar to what is known in the West as the hero's journey, only this came a bit earlier, and it stresses the structure of the whole tale, not just the arc of the protagonist. And here we see something already brewing, something of these traditional elements of fairy tale structure already coming into play. But of course, for me as a Russian reader, as soon as I see the story retold, it's a familiar story, I see that the retelling is being set up. But of course, the whole book is not so much a retelling as a kind of a mashup of various stories. So it's not based on one single folk tale. But yes, these are the very famous words. The character of Morozko is presented in the story within a story says, "Are you quite warm, my beauty?" And this is a very famous phrase, and many people would just use it here to ask somebody if they are warm or cold outside. So it's something that is famous from books and from cartoons and so on. And we see a lot of this fairy tale structure playing out in the story, because it's both a kind of an initiation for Vasya, for her coming into full power, as many fantasy heroes do, but also a prolonged story of the interaction between the human world and the magical world. And the idea of a boundary comes into play very much with characters crossing the boundary and things crossing the boundary, like the talisman, the snow star that she's given. And in the same way, in the end, when she's refusing to take the riches that Morozko is offering her, it's also a very significant step for any fairy tale hero or heroine. She refuses to indebt herself to the magical world. She refuses to bring in things from the magical world, and thus the magical world is indebted to her and will obey her in a way, right? So you see these elements of fairy tale structure, and they're used very, very well, and I think in a very innovative way.
And I think even before she even refuses his riches, like she's already establishing that connection with the magical world, with the domovoi and the
Vasila, the horse spirit.
I almost said Vasilisa, and I'm like, that's not right. But yeah, she's already indebting herself to them, and I think not only were those kind of folklore creatures quite endearing, but they provided a not quite a bridge to the magical world, but like they
in a way,
yeah, they felt very real, but still magical at the same time, if that makes sense.
Yes,
I agree with Kate here. And I didn't think about that when I was reading the book, but now that you mention it, Igor, that adds a whole nother level. And I like that a lot.
Well, it kind of starts off with oh, sorry.
Oh no, go ahead. I was gonna deviate the subject, so go ahead.
Oh, okay. Well, I was just gonna say it's kind of interesting that it kind of all starts off in a way with Vasia's father taking this talisman from Moroshko, and in that scene, it's like he transcends into a magical world because no one else realizes, oh, what happened, saw him or anything like that.
And kind of a bubble around Moroshko.
Yeah. So I thought that was very interesting.
If you think about it, a lot of the action in this story is based around that idea of indebtedness, because if you think about the beginning when her father goes to find a wife and the I can't remember his name, the prince or whatever, they're trying to figure out what to do with their daughter, and he says, oh, if I let his daughter marry this person who is higher standing, then he's going to do whatever I tell him, and he'll have to take my daughter who is a little odd, and we find out exactly why she's odd, but and that's how that whole thing comes to be. And if Anna didn't go back with him, how the story wouldn't have moved in the way it did.
Mm-hmm. So. Yeah, I think on the flip side of that, indebtedness and also power, and that's other aspects of power are kind of explored through characters like, I'm thinking more specifically Constantine, which. Oh, Constantine. Yeah. So yeah, I like that indebtedness. I didn't think of that before. So I kind of want to reread it yet again with that mindset in mind. But I think power is also a good kind of coin flip side to that. Yeah. So. Do we want to talk about Anna, since we talked about how he went to go find a wife?
I love how they set it up in a way where you're not quite sure what's going on with her. And I don't know if you did, but I went into it. I know he does it just like
yes.
I imagined him looking like the entire time I was reading it. I was like, oh, this is creepy.
That song's playing in the background, that Hellfire song.
Yes. It's very similar. But I don't know if you guys felt this, but when we first meet Anna, I'm like, does she have mental illness? Is maybe she has schizophrenia or something? And then when you find out that, she's seeing the spirits, and then eventually you're like, oh my goodness, she's like Vasia, and I think they call her a witch. It's like, wow, like that, comparing that idea with her serious Christianity, obviously going to cause some serious dissonance inside of her.
Yeah. I actually felt sorry for her the first time that I read it, because in the end, she is like Vasha, but growing up in Moscow, where I expect Christianity has a much firmer hold, she was treated as if she had a mental illness, and, well, very roughly, I would say. So I can understand why she is the way she is, and why when she then comes into contact with Vasha, she almost hates her for what she is, because we often forget, but how old is she when she goes with Piotr? Think maybe 16, 17 years old. So she's still very young. And even though she becomes very ruthless, I can understand why she is the way she is.
It's like she sees Vasya dealing with the same things, but Vasya has a better sense of self, and she doesn't like fear it, and she doesn't beat herself up about it. And I feel with Anna, she's like, there's something wrong with me. I'm seeing demons. The devil is coming for me. And so she's like comparing herself with Vasya, and there's like that. I can imagine it causes some sort of hatred and anger and even maybe jealousy a little bit, because she doesn't feel okay with herself, and she sees Vasya feeling like dealing with her life.
Mm-hmm.
Her relationship with Constantine was one of my, I don't want to call it one of my favorite parts because it's tragic and horrible, but I felt it very compelling throughout the story. And the way Constantine like manipulates her near the end using it. Oh, so sad.
And it's so easy for people like that to do that, because you get these people who are so manipulative and narcissistic like Constantine, and then you get these people with no stable sense of identity, so they will kind of thrust their identity onto them. They're like, you will be what I want you to be, and they're like, well, thank God I'm finally something, because I haven't known what I am for such a long time. And it's such a bad dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean,
Constantine does have that, like, he's supposed to be very attractive and all of that as well. Yeah,
I was actually going to say, I think that's one of the main things, is that Anna doesn't have that support that Vasya does. And also, she's in Moscow. She's not as exposed to the kind of folkloric old religion teachings. So she doesn't realize that, oh, these are just the old spirits. She doesn't know what these are, but no one else is able to tell her that,
And she doesn't know that there is a relationship possible between people and the spirits, and she doesn't even want to consider it. Like, she sees that Vasya is giving food to the spirit, and if she were less traumatized by this fact, but that the spirits exist, then she would probably ask, what are you doing and why and how? But no, she's completely closed off because of her past experience.
The first time I read it, I thought that maybe because, we see her first in Moscow, and everyone thinks she's crazy because she jumps at things in the corner. She sees things that no one else sees. And so I felt, I did feel sympathy for her. And so I had hoped, because, it said that she saw them doing the things that she would eventually see them doing, in the north as well. So that when she met Vasya, I thought, well, maybe she would find a kindred spirit. Yeah. I didn't know the direction the story was going to go at the time. So I did have sympathy for her, because I thought, well, she would see Vasya, she would see that there was a connection, that there was a relationship that could be had, that she didn't have to live in fear. I had no such qualms the second time reading it, because by the end of my first read through, I really disliked her. But I had hoped that Vasya would help show her a different way. So I was really disappointed when Constantine came into the picture and completely just manipulated her and used her fears against her, because he was just such a narcissistic character. He really bothered me. I mean, I don't know. I can't really explain it too well, but I was just bothered by him from the first time we met him in Moscow before he even came to the north.
Yeah, I found that the dynamic between Vasya, Anna, and Constantine, that still does intrigue me, and there's so much to unpack there, I think. And I think Vasya I think Vasya would have helped Anna, but Anna wasn't open to and receptive to help, other than from, I guess that's another way to look at it, is like she only found solace and isolation from like the demons in the church. So that was her only like refuge. And so she wasn't going to, I feel like she wasn't going to accept any help outside of that. And Constantine was a personification of the church for her in more ways than one. So I feel like Anna's a victim or yeah, no, I mean, yeah, I totally agree. You know, why is this girl not being treated the way I was? Kind of this cyclical kind of, not necessarily abuse, but for lack of a better term, abuse cycle. Which almost, yeah,
a lot of it. Well, like Anna wanted Constantine so bad, and then Constantine has this whole angle of his lustful thoughts towards Vasya. In the beginning of the book, when he first comes in, I was like, oh, please don't let there be some sort of like romance between them. Just please don't. And I'm glad it didn't end up that way. But it builds slowly, and there's this, it's not really a love triangle, but it's the three of them in this odd relationship with each other where like the feelings are going in opposite directions. It's not like your traditional love triangle, and it causes all this friction between them, mostly from Anna's point of view, because she has all this jealousy and all this anger. She not only does she hate Vasya because Vasya sees the spirits and she's not treated the way she was, and all the other reasons that we have been talking about, but also because she has Constantine's attention, and that's what she wants. Because not only is the church her refuge, but she sees this beautiful man who could also be her refuge if he paid attention to her, and he won't. Which is exactly what he uses against her in the end of the book. He says, I need you, I want you, and she does anything he says.
Yeah. And then he turns around and says, I see nothing in you, or something like that.
It was horrible.
It was horrible.
That's just cruel. Yeah.
It was cruel. I feel like Vasya doesn't even really know that he sees her that way, that Constantine has all of these feelings about her. I think that she's like, she totally does not pick up on it, which probably is even more infuriating for Anna, because it's not only is she unworthy of his attention, but she does not even care about having it.
Yeah. I really liked that there was the barest little hint of romance in the book, but they don't go into it. I thought it was just like the perfect amount for the story. Little promise of more maybe later, but they focused on this like really unhealthy love, and I think that did more for the story this time around. But I really loved that.
I liked the one of the comments that we got very recently, that Constantine really does blame Vasya for his own lust. And this is actually there's something that rings true historically, because medieval religious philosophy often specifically said that the woman is always guilty, she is the vessel of lust, or something like this. It's something that rings true historically. On the other hand, one thing that any Russian person would recognize is that historical Orthodox priests, and up until today, they actually, unlike the Catholics, have to marry. So this is one big difference between this character and any possible character in a historical novel that is a priest. But then possibly he would just have a very estranged wife and still look the other way.
Interesting. So did that make you think that he was going to try to force Vasya into marrying him? Did you wonder if that's where the story was going?
I wasn't thinking about this, because a normal Orthodox priest just gets married before he gets a parish.
Oh,
like he gets sent
okay.
To be a parish priest. So they just do it at a very young age. So this is just something that I ticked for myself. This is not a historical description. This is something more like a fairy tale story without these details. So everything is open. But the way he was used by the bear, by the spirit of death and fear, I think it was a really nice turn on these religious thoughts, when actually the devil is speaking with a voice that pretends to be divine, And this is something that, of course, can be found in Russian literature, in actual religious thoughts from the time, and so on. This is something that also rang true for me, and it was very well executed. I mean, I don't know about you, I started suspecting this voice from the second scene with it, because I was sure that Arden would not show the actual Christian divinity as an evil power, as an overbearing power, right? She's very open to any religious expression, and she doesn't put labels on religions like Christianity bad, paganism good, nothing like that.
Yeah.
What about you? When did you start to suspect?
Well, I was going to say that actually a lot of the critiques or negative critiques that I have read and heard about specifically this first book is a lot of people were uncomfortable and really disliked the depiction of Christianity. And there was this perception that, oh, Christianity is being portrayed as bad. And I on one hand, I can see that, but on the other hand, I'm like, that's not really... It's kind of like neutral ground. It's the people that are involved with it that is the positive or negative. And I don't think there's strictly, like you said, Christianity bad, old religion good. I think there are sides to everything, and I don't think she's taking a firm stance either way. It's really the power structures at play within people, and greed and desire and lust. But yeah,
I think she cashes in on the fear that permeates some areas of Christianity, the fear of the other, the fear of the devil, and all of that, and then the ways that people judge you and then ostracize you when you fit in with what is right for Christianity. And those are things that ring true in Christianity. They're not the good things, but they're things that do happen. And I think people can get upset when they're not portrayed in a good light, when people just highlight the negative aspects. But it's true in this situation. And I can't remember when I figured out that it wasn't God speaking to him. I did eventually before they revealed it, but the reveal in the church, I think, was just very powerful and very well done. Oh, it was so good. I liked how Constantine reacted to it, and he wasn't violent about it, and he didn't scream, and he didn't have, it was just this unfolding in his head. I loved that.
It was very creepy. If this was an adaptation, that would be a really spooky part.
I thought about that, and I don't really know. I was like, would I want it to be a movie? Would I want it to be a TV show? And I don't really know if I would want it in any other sort of medium. I don't know what you guys think about that.
I think any adaptation is probably not going to be good enough for me. So,
I'm afraid that if it were adapted, I wouldn't watch it because I love the trilogy so much. I think that it would lose a lot of what I love in the translation from book to screen. So I definitely, if it's ever adapted, I will not be watching it.
Yeah.
I like what Brianna said there. When we were talking about indebtedness earlier, it made me think about Constantine and the way that he feels with the God when he thinks it's God talking to him, but also the people, how they treat Constantine is similar to how he treats his relationship with God. He blindly listened to what God was telling him when he thought it was divine. And the people will blindly listen to what Constantine tells them to because he is the voice of the divine for them. And so they get taken in by him, but he's also taken in by the bear. And it's very similar. It mirrors itself. But
I think more than that, more than it being this quote unquote divine divinity, it's that the bear and Constantine are telling Constantine and the people respectively what they want to hear. And it's really kind of reinforcing the reinforcing thoughts and ideas and desires that they already had and justifying it in a way.
Well, I think there was a bit, I don't know if it was foreshadowing, but I felt that it was kind of foreshadowing, at least on my second read through, this scene where Vasya is in the forest helping him find his plants and things to make his dyes. And she makes a comment about where he says that he's there to save their souls. And she responds with, be wary or be careful. Like that it's that God doesn't speak in the voice that you want to hear or of your own making or something like that.
Yeah, I know.
Early on. So when he was started, when Constantine started hearing, God speaking to him, even in the first time, there were shadows and it was dark, and you don't really think of that with Christianity. You don't think, oh, well, God is speaking to me from the shadow. God would speak to me from like a place of light. So I'm not sure if I really caught on to it the first time I read it, but it did make more sense reading it a second time. That it wasn't God or a benevolent spirit. It felt like something definitely dark and what's the word? Malevolent.
Yeah, I mean, that's the exact word that I would use to describe it. It felt malevolent. It didn't feel. I didn't know what it was initially, but it didn't feel like it was what he thought it was.
I think that another point with this opposition between Constantine and Vasya is the presence or absence of humility, because Vasya is quite humble when it comes to the spirit world, to the rules of this world, to following them or showing her inner strength to question them, as she does question what Morozko is telling her later on, while Constantine is not showing any humility at all. He's following the voice because the voice is telling him what he wants to hear, and he's thinking that it just, as you said, amplifies what's already inside of him, amplifies himself in a way. So I think this is a nice contrast.
On a lighter, more happy note, though, I just because we're at like almost 50 minutes, I want to talk about Morozko and specifically Solovey.
I knew this was coming. You were like lighting up.
I know.
She's about the horse now, isn't she?
Yep. Yeah. No, so, kind of going back to like that bridge and that from a real world to a magical world, Vasya physically transcends that to go to Morozko's land, house, whatever you call it, to his world. And I thought that was really interesting, and how time really does stop. I think Morozko says, like, I can bring you back the morning after you left, as if you never left. And she was there for technically a couple of weeks, a month or so, or something like that.
I want to know what the Nightingale is all about. Oh, that little breadcrumb drove me crazy. I put, instead of like putting tabs on quotes and stuff, I put tabs on all the little breadcrumbs where I was like, this is going to be important. This is going to be important. Go back and kind of put them all together. But the Nightingale scene, I don't know if, is there anything else, Igor, about nightingales in like Russian mythology? Is there something we could know that
there is?
Understand?
I feel like you need to put some glasses on now, Igor.
I don't know whether it will actually play any role because it's so different. I mean, first of all, there is nightingales, just real nightingales. We love them, we cherish them, and they are there every summer. But there is actually a folklore character named Nightingale, but he's a baddie. He's a bad guy who possesses an unusually strong voice, and basically like kind of a comic book anti-hero or villain, like Black Canary in DC Comics. He just shouts and people fall, stunned by his voice. So this is the character named Solovey, the Nightingale, in Russian folklore. I'm not sure that this will play into the story in any way. I can't see any link between the horse and this character, so I suppose there will be some kind of a turnaround of this character in Folklore, and maybe the horse will show some magic voice or something, but I don't know. And Brian is saying you'll figure it out later in the series. So, I mean, when I see somebody named Nightingale in the Russian fairy tale, I'm starting to think about some foreshadowing, but so far it's completely different from the stock character.
So I will say that, as I mentioned before, I read this for a book club. So there was a huge conversation going on around this book with about a dozen people. And someone mentioned something, and I didn't catch it when I read it, but as soon as she read it, my face apparently went super pale, and I just, oh yeah. So I will just say there's a prophecy that is talked about in the first book that is later in the series. So I will not say what the prophecy is, just in case you didn't pick it up on the first time. So yeah. So essentially, the end of the book got ruined for me in that book club. But yeah, message me later, Kate. It'll be fine.
So the prophecy is the first book, but you don't realize it until later. Oh, it's gonna drive me crazy now.
Reread the book.
You've already started book 2, though.
That's true.
I'm only 2 chapters in, so
yes, I have lots of feels about it too. So in case anyone doesn't know, I am a self-proclaimed horse girl. So having a character that has a communication with horses and having a horse character that genuinely, honest to God, feels like a horse. I'm like, this is how a horse would act. This is like the type of personality a horse like him would have. Like, this is great. So I loved Solovey. He was fantastic. And I don't know. I didn't expect to have a non-human character feel so human at the same time. So.
Yeah, in the scene where she is grooming his hair and mane, I mean, his retorts are perfect.
Yeah.
She like braids it, doesn't she?
She
And
plays
no
the
braiding or
vanity.
something.
She plays to
No
his vanity
flowers.
very well.
Yeah.
In the scene where she's grooming him.
Yeah. I don't know if she's a horse girl, but she's a horse girl in my eyes. So I know she lives in Vermont. So
it almost feels like, and obviously because I haven't read the other books, I don't know, but it feels like Solovey was there waiting for her, and that to a certain extent, Morozko like knew she was going to come to him at some point, and so he had this horse waiting for her, waiting to be with her, like it almost felt like a familiar or something.
Well, it kind of goes back to what Yolene was talking about the original prologue. Like, it would make sense that he would be waiting there, but again, cutting that out, I think it makes it much more appealing. So,
one thing I really liked, because that made me think about Morozko and how he gives the father the jewel and everything, and how I can't remember her full name, Dunyaska, however she says it.
Dunya is okay.
Yeah, how she like takes care of the jewel for her, and when Morozko comes and he's like, "Why have you said it?" She's like, "Please don't. She's not ready." And he listens to her, and I liked that because I think it made him feel less like a villain character. I know he kind of straddles, like there's some people who think that he's evil and some people who don't, and like it was kind of, he didn't feel like, oh, this is a hero or this is a good spirit 100%. And I like that he appreciated Dunya's relationship with her, and I think that made it even harder when she dies and is like resurrected as the zombie vampire thing. That was so sad.
Oh. Yes.
That's another aspect that I did not expect. It's like, okay, I guess we're moving to horror now.
They're zombies. Okay, we're gonna roll with it.
Was it a zombie or a vampire? Like, I guess either or, it doesn't really matter.
Sort of
but
vampire, right? A
I think it was more vampire.
It's both, possibly. I mean, she uses the Russian word upir, which means either a revived dead person or a blood-sucking creature. So it's kind of both. It's distantly related to the actual word vampire.
Oh,
interesting.
Yeah, the scenes with Alyosha, I thought were fantastic. The sibling relationships, and what little you see of Sasha as well.
Oh, I like him already. Yeah, I'm excited to see him in the later books. I think he'll be a good, because he's like the opposite of Constantine in a lot of ways, and I think that he's like a version of like a good priest who's going to work and do good in the world, where Constantine took advantage of his power. I do love the sibling relationships, and Alyosha is like a cinnamon roll. I don't want anything to happen to him.
Sasha is a kind of a paladin. He's a kind of a righteous knight. And he's actually this book's version of a semi-historical, semi-legendary character. So, yes, together with the Prince Dmitri, together with Prince, was it Vladimir, they're all linked to historical events. So I'm really looking forward to big, epic history playing out on the pages of the book 2 and 3. So.
Yeah, so we're actually coming up on an hour. So I think that's probably a good transition to kind of wrapping this up. I could go on and on about this book, but I know it's really late for you, Stacy, really late for you, Igor, really late for you, Yolene. So with that, like, do you have any expectations for the second book? Or any thoughts, any hopes of what you'll see in the second book?
I read the inside flap of the book, and it wasn't what I was expecting. But then again, I remember when I read the little blurb for The Bear and the Nightingale, I don't think it did any justice explaining what the story actually was. So I have no idea what's going to happen in the second book. I honestly feel, and I don't know.
Oh, she froze.
Oh, I'm frozen?
Oh, no, you're back. You're back.
I don't remember what I was saying when I cut off, but I think that it could have been a standalone book, so I don't know what's going to happen next, because I think The Bear and the Nightingale was such a well-encompassed single story that you don't necessarily need that. But I want it because I want to know more. So
I really hope she would travel a lot. To me, it felt like finishing the first act of a Japanese RPG, like Final Fantasy, when you walk around for the first several hours and then you get an airship and you can travel everywhere.
Yep.
She's got her means of travel, and I really hope she visits other places. She says in the end that she wants to visit Moscow, she wants to visit Novgorod, which is a brilliantly beautiful city even today, and Constantinople. Why not?
All with Solovey.
Yeah, I'm excited. I don't have a lot of expectations for book 2 either. I haven't read anything about what happens in it. But yeah, I was very satisfied with the way that the first book wrapped up. So even if I didn't like the second and third one, which I've only heard from everyone that they're better, I've never heard anybody say that it doesn't get better as it goes on. But even if it didn't, I would still really love this book. So I'm just excited. I had high expectations and they were already met. So we'll see how it goes from here.
I will say for me, just to kind of talk about the trilogy as a whole, each book gives me a distinct feeling, and I feel like they have self-contained arcs within each of the books, and they feel so different from one another, but still they are the same. That's a terrible way to describe it, and I apologize. So once you get to it, hopefully you'll understand. And I think they each kind of build off of each other, and they bring something new to the conversation and to the story, and I love it. So again, I'm biased. So
I can't believe we didn't talk about it, and I don't want to derail our like Midwest goodbye that we're going to be doing, but we didn't talk about Pyotr's sacrifice at the end and how he gives himself, and that's how it was kind of like the love conquers all, the Harry's mom keeping him protected from Voldemort type thing. But I loved it anyway. Like it was so sad, and when she cries over him, it was so well done.
Yeah, I think for all like, you know, the kind of contemplative, like slow moving plot for the majority of the book, that ending felt very rushed, but at the same time, it's not, I didn't not like it. Yeah. Making sure I got my words
I
right.
think it's quite natural because the characters don't move away from their home in the book. And so when everything just comes to them, it can feel a bit rushed, but it's natural for this kind of story. They don't travel to Mordor. The Mordor comes to them.
Yeah. And I think it's a good, hopefully it's a good transition for you guys to the second book, because the second book is a bit more faster paced than this first one. So, and I think it's a good transition to kind of prepare you for that. So, yeah, so we're at an hour. I don't want to take up too much more of your time. Thank you, Igor. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Stacy. Thank you, Kate. Thank you, Yolene. Thank you, everyone that joined in the chat. I really appreciate it. We will be having a discussion regarding book 2, The Girl in the Tower, with different folks. Maybe we can rope Igor into it again as well. No
I'd be happy to join.
No pressure. But that'll be probably in the first or second week of February. So you're more than welcome to join us again as well. I will be scheduling that in the next couple of weeks. So again, thank you everyone for discussing it with me. Thank you everyone in the chat for joining the discussion as well. Hopefully you will love the rest of the trilogy as much as I do and Stacy does and Yolene does. And you guys have a great day.